Welcome back. Today we are talking with author, organizational psychologist, entrepreneur, team building expert, Kathryn McEwen. Kathryn, lots of great information in the first segment there. And at the start of the introduction, you talked about measurement. Well, now let's really talk about that. How do you go about measuring resilience?
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning, that was my main curiosity, was the measures. And so we've developed 3 measures, published them in the literature. The resilience at work individual scale measures the 7 components that create individual resilience. The resilience at work team scale is the one we've been speaking about, but there's also a resilience at work leader scale. And for me, the measure, well, that's my work has been to develop these measures, and particularly to look at how we align those to create systemic change, because I think we focus a lot on the individuals. A group of individual resilient people does not make a resilient team. It's quite a different construct. And I think in particularly in my field of measurement, I do get quite curious at why people think that if we take, say, 8 people who are highly resilient and we put them together, that they create a resilient team, because the construct of team resilience is quite different. And the analogy would be, the team of champions and the champion team, just because we've got, 7, great ice hockey players, and we put them together, if they can't play together, if the connections aren't worked on, then they really can't be resilient. And then, of course, I'm also interested in the impact of leadership. So aligning those creates a systemic change. And I think the missing piece at the moment that we'll get to is, how do we also then connect that to the organizational processes and plans around this concept called organizational resilience? So the how you measure question is what I've been working on and what I've done. I think I've done that piece. I just think there's not this connection at the moment with the organizational resilience piece, which I think we'll get to later anyway.
So how do you report it, though? And how did I word the question? How do you report a resilience level, and how do you identify deficiencies to enable yourself to go forward without making it personal? And by that, I mean, you're doing a report, let's say, on Alex's team. Mm-hmm. And let's say the findings are Alex's team is not that resilient. How do you report it in a way that doesn't make it sound like the team members are screwing up or bad, or Alex is bad? How do you go about doing that?
This is something I feel really strongly about, and it's been a really key design principle with our tech platform, Click, because I did not want people to be compared. And this is the reason why theoretically it's wrong anyway. So if we're a resilient team, it's actually, it's about our context, right? So it's about how we're deploying resources to create a state of resilience given the challenges we have. So it's dynamic, it shifts, it changes. We can't claim it, we're on a constant journey of it. And what we do is really unique to us. So we can't compare Alex's team to Kath's team, because the challenges are uniquely different. So once we start to create benchmarks, which create a sense of deficiency, we're in trouble. What we need to be doing is be taking a strengths focus. Okay, so in your team, Alex, so maybe you're a front public facing team. Maybe you're in the emergency department of the hospital. Maybe I'm in the finance department of the hospital. Your challenges are really different from my challenges. I can't say you're worse than me, because it's actually around how you're managing, how you're being the best you can be in your part of the system, and that demands quite different things from me. So our approach in all of our work is to look at, for the challenges we have, what strengths do we have within our team in terms of relationship processes that we can leverage to better manage that stress, and what might be some areas, not a deficiency, but some areas of development. So some aspect of our resilient DNA that at the moment, if we developed, would really be helpful, because we've definitely moved away from this sense that resilience is static, that it's a trait, it's a personality trait, it's a journey of constant dynamic shifting. And we can be going really well, and then suddenly something can happen. We might have a new team member, we might have a new customer. Everything has to be regrouped. So it's a journey. The other thing that I think is really important is the word reporting. You know, reporting always implies we're reporting to someone who probably is the risk management director, you know, is probably someone who, some poor person who's been assigned that role that they have to report on. No, it's about collective accountability. All of us have that collective accountability for identifying the challenges we need a healthier relationship with and for working on those. And if we could be tracking those and also tracking our solutions, which is what we're trying to do at the moment with our tech platform, is how wonderful would that be to be able to see across the board what the pain points are, what the trends are, without saying, Alex, you're not good enough. And also to be able to see the solutions that are being generated so that your silo can share them with my silo. So very much taking that strengths approach, very much saying resilience is dynamic, it's changeable, it's a state, it's not a trait. So that whole idea of benchmarking is actually not good. So I'm very, very strong on that comparison and not good enough, and very strong on reporting and it being one person's responsibility versus everyone is collectively accountable for this.
There is a bit
contentious on that, but that's sort of, yeah.
There is when like I remember from interviews that I've had throughout the years with different clients, or whether it be full-time or contract work, you're always asked, you know, what are your strengths? And it's always followed up with the next question, what are your weaknesses? So if we're reporting, as you say, you know, on common strengths, you know, for each team, or strengths within a team, I shouldn't say common ones, because you did say, you know, there can be differences between teams. But if we're reporting on strengths, doesn't weaknesses fall in there somewhere?
Yeah, no, so I'm not saying we discount that, but what I'm saying that at a team level, because resilience is unique to each team, we're identifying the challenge we need a healthier relationship with. And we are bringing our existing strengths and looking at our existing development areas for that challenge. So we're not saying we need to be above the benchmark on everything. We're saying for this unique challenge for us, how do we better manage it together? What do we need to do for our team process dynamics, stakeholder engagements to better manage that challenge? So we can't compare, because the challenge that is going to get you resilient at the moment in your emergency department be quite different from me in my back office role. But we're both becoming more resilient because we're developing a healthier relationship with the challenge we have that we need to better manage to stay relevant, to stay well, or to stay, you know, in business. The traditional, let's measure everyone and you've all got to be above this area and you're slipping on that one, Alex, you know, pick your game up, it just doesn't fit with the dynamic nature of resilience. It doesn't fit with the uniqueness of resilience. It doesn't fit with we need to harness strengths and not make people feel bad, because there's equally opportunities as well as development areas in every challenge, isn't there?
Yes.
The challenges essentially are your risks. You know, if you're identifying the challenges, you're identifying the risks.
And you brought up a good point. Yeah, I personally have never, ever liked that performance review, that annual performance review where, you know, you need to work on all these deficiencies, you know, all these things. Well, if you're focusing on that, then all of a sudden you're not focusing on your strength, and it actually brings you down. In my opinion, it actually brings you down.
Definitely.
It's not making me more resilient. It's making me worse.
Definitely. And I think in hard times, which we've had, the deficit focus leads to hopelessness.
Yeah.
You know, if we feel we're failing on all, you know, so even the most, one of the areas I do a lot of work in is dysfunctional teams, or teams in trouble, I prefer to call them. Even in the worst team, there are things that are good, you know, and you have to capture them and you have to build from them. You can't go in and say, you're a terrible team, that's why I'm here. Look at all these things you've got to work on. It's okay, well, what is good here?
Yeah.
What did you do the last time that worked? You know, so it's very much that language, and we're trying to build that strengths-based language also into our conversation. So when we do our work with building team resilience, whether it's personal facilitation as coaches or whether it's in our tech platform, what we're trying to do all the time is look at how do we build a language which is a coaching language, which is about talking about our strengths, harnessing the strengths, looking at our development areas in a very constructive, strengths-based way. So rather than pick your actor, Alex, you know, it's about what would it look like if we were more connected with our stakeholders, rather than, you know, your clients are complaining about you. So the whole language, you know, the whole language around resilience, you know, the strengths-based is very powerful, because people then also don't feel in deficit. So not only are they not getting reported on the comparisons, they don't feel their problems are negative things. They feel that they see them more as ways in which we can improve and opportunities. I sound very psychology here, but it's true. It's true.
No, it's well. Hey, you're a psychologist, you know, organizational
Yeah,
psychologist, so you can
yeah.
get, you know, psychological there. That's okay.
Thank you.
I thought of another question there as you were talking as well. Because in an earlier example, you mentioned sometimes our resilience will change because our roles change, or our team focus changes. We
Yes.
take on a big load of extra clients, I think was one of your examples.
Yes.
How do you go about addressing if a team is feeling resilient, but in their next quote unquote reporting or measurement period, they've dipped? And it could
Yes.
be because extra work has been thrown at them.
Yeah.
You know, how do you go about addressing that?
It's a good question, because I say to people, sometimes when lots of things have gone wrong and you've not gone backwards, it's progress.
Hmm.
You know, so sometimes you can see people have slightly dipped, and this is a really common thing. People have slightly dipped, or maybe they're the same, but when you look at the challenges they've been taken on, they're huge. So I see that as progress, because somewhere in the DNA of the, you know, the resilient DNA, what they've been able to do is better manage that than they might otherwise have, and the dip is not quite so much a dip. And I think the other factor we have to acknowledge is that if resilience is a dynamic state, it does dip. It goes up and it dips, and you know, and we can't say we're okay, we're good, we've done this, or equally not say we've messed this up and we're stuck down here now. It's fluid, and so it's a very, very important principle, I think, when thinking about this, is it's very context specific and it's variable.
It's true. If you want to reach, you know, the most beautiful valley, you got to climb some mountains. And
I'm well sure
down,
about that.
you know,
Yeah.
you know, if you want to see the highest hills, you got to go through the lowest valleys. So,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
So it is, you know, as you say,
Yep.
lots of up and downs. So let's look at alignment. How do we align this to other disciplines like business continuity management, risk, et cetera, et cetera? How do we bring all this together?
Yeah, so that's sort of the holy grail, I think, because I think we've got some great work happening in your space, some great work working in my space, but I actually don't see the connections. And just as a backstory, a few years ago, I got asked to co-present at a conference with a chap called Jason Gotch. So hi, Jason, if you're listening. And Jason was away, and I researched him to think about, okay, well, we'll co-present it. And I was shocked, because there was all this language I'd never heard of around organizational resilience. He was, you know, BCI, disaster management, you know, cyber security. I'm thinking, there's no way we can co-present. We're in different, you know, planets. But what I did is I came across the 100 Resilient Cities framework and the attributes. And straight away, I saw this amazing synergy, because they were talking about attributes that I was talking about: robust, resourceful, flexible, integrated. And so I presented on linking teams' resilience to these attributes. And I still think there's a lot that could be done in that space. And I make the analogy with values in organizations. So my first memory of values was in the 1980s when organizations were looking at culture change. And the idea was, if we had some guiding principles, we wouldn't need to have huge numbers of plans and details on anything, because the guiding principles would be, all we need. So we could think of those guiding principles, attributes, if you want to call them, as the linkages. Because if we had plans which were truly integrated, were flexible, were inclusive, if we have plans like that, if we had, and we're working cooperatively within teams on that, then that creates the alignment. And the other thing that came to mind when I was thinking at that time was that I'd done I facilitated a strategic risk meeting in a very large health network. And at the end of the day, they had all these strategic risks. And someone said, but none of these are around the patient. And the CEO quickly said, okay, what we're going to do. And someone said, we can rewrite them around the patient. But I just thought that was a really interesting misalignment, because they were doing huge work on ethos, patient-centered care, and their values. And here we were at a strategic risk meeting where there wasn't any linkages to that. So I don't think we're ever going to get, because your world's really different. It's a lot about plans and systems and standards and quite a different language. Mine's more around behaviors. But Jason subsequently got me involved in an interest group looking at what organizational resilience was, and also got me to present at the Risk Institute of Australia. And everyone agreed with me that culture was important. And, if we didn't have these resilient teams, we weren't going to be able to deliver on all our plans and our, BCI and so on. So maybe these attributes are the linkages, because I'm not sure how we could have different measures. I know some people are trying to do that, and maybe if the measures can still be aligned, I'm not quite sure. But I don't know about you, Alex, but I don't think we've nailed that yet, anywhere near.
No, I think we're a ways from that, but I think the core, that your business continuity or organization resilience, whatever, needs to focus on the things that you brought forward first, before you even look, how resilient is our plan? Well, because you gave the good example, just a minute ago, about all those risks that were identified, and they actually didn't address some of the core values and where they should have been focusing on the patient. Mm-hmm. Well, that could happen too in business continuity. They'll focus on a plan, but not actually the people, places, and things they need to focus on that these plans address.
Yes.
So I think what needs to happen is they take a step back from looking at the deliverable and look more at the road.
Absolutely. And I wonder whether another aspect of that in this looking at the road is, I'm noticing, and I saw this when I was on this interest group around organizational resilience, is people were just rebadging existing functions and roles and positioning for a new role, as organizational resilience officer or whatever that might be. As the more adding on roles, and I'm quite interested in how the chief wellbeing officer is going to add to the mix of all this as well. We've yet to see. But we don't want roles. We want integrated skill sets that create plans which are integrative and reflective, that are supported by people who are integrated and reflective, using the 100 Resilient City principles here. So the more we go into ownership and rebadging ourselves and reinventing ourselves, and a bit like reinventing the word resilience. Why are we reinventing a beautiful word like resilience? We don't need to. We know what it is. Why do we need to reinvent a new role called organizational resilience? This is just a concept that we bring existing knowledge and skill, in which we get teams to use their collective energy to enable, rather than some poor person having to consult with teams and then write it up and then maybe feel it's put in a cupboard that no one looks at. Skills versus roles, integration versus silos. Lots of things. quite aspirational in some ways, but lots of things to be thinking about, because if we continue down this fixed role thing, and my stuff might be stuck with the chief wellbeing officer now, and having worked with so many executive teams where integration doesn't happen, is it going in the right direction is the question.
We only have 4 minutes left, but you just got me thinking about one other quick question.
Mm-hmm.
How does diversity, inclusion, and equality come into this with building team resilience?
Diversity and inclusion create far better decision making. However, without psychological safety, they don't make any difference. And there is some emerging research around this. So we can do all our diversity inclusion till we're blue in the face. But if I'm a minority group, younger female, and I don't feel psychologically safe, then it's not going to work. Absolutely. So again, it's almost like, we also have our diversity inclusion officers now, so there's all these functions that arise, but it's, if we can create psychological safety and inclusion at our team levels, we don't need diversity inclusion reporting or functions. Sorry, diversity inclusion officers, I'm not discounting the importance of it. It's just the way in which it evolves as a role, rather than a fabric of the way we are. And the way we are in our team is we listen to each other, we appreciate diverse opinions, we're happy to be challenged, and that's part of this DNA of resilience in these components that we're looking at, is the capacity to constructively identify and discuss and surface the stuff that's getting in the way, and take it forward. And that builds our resilience as a team. We adapt more, we're more creative, we innovate more, we're more relevant to the business.
We have 2 minutes left. You want to take 1 minute for any final thought on building team resilience?
I just want to reinforce the over-focus on individual resilience, and that if we don't create alignment in our teams, then we can spend decades trying to invest in self-care, and it's not going to make any difference. I'm not saying that's not important. We have to show up having done that, but now's the time to harness the power of teams, to be able to scale measurement, to be able to get great data, to be able to link those all the different pieces of the equation in this space. And to do some great things which are the fabric of the organization rather than separate plans and functions.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Sometimes I think those are just Band-Aid solutions to give the appearance of something rather than actually addressing it.
And they call it weaponizing resilience, quite often, where you're running resilient workshops and saying, suck it up, princess, get another leg, or whatever the big thing is. But it's the system issue. So systemic is the way to go. We have to have systemic approaches that are far beyond the individual and beyond teams and leaders as well, that actually look at the whole ecosystem, and the plans and the BCI and the cybersecurity are part of that ecosystem. So all pieces of the ecosystem are dynamic, they're shifting, they're changing. We need to start to try and get some alignment around what that is, to really create sustainable solutions. And gosh, we're going to need them, because it's just, it's an interesting world out there at the moment, isn't it?
Well, we've come to the end of the show. Kathryn, thank you very much for joining us. I really enjoyed the things you had to convey, the measurement, the alignment, the diversity, the defining, and how we can go about building team resilience without making people feel as though they are wrong and they're bad. And I really like what you had to say about some of these positions that are getting created and these plans that doesn't address building team resilience. So I really enjoyed our chat today. So thank you very much for sharing all of that information.
Thank you, Alex. It's been a pleasure.
And shout out to Tammy Horton and for mentioning you. And you mentioned someone else.
Yes, Artie as well. Thank you, Artie. I saw you mentioned the definition. So
yes, Dr. Artie Anshel, who has also been on the show. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Kathryn, for joining us. I really appreciate it. And everybody watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody.
If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.